What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we're going to go over the top 10 surprising sales I saw last week. There's a little twist to this one. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So, doing the top 10 surprising sales I saw this week, 5 on the high side, 5 on the low side. But a little twist with this one is there was a special heritage auction this week. So if you're not familiar with these, what I do is I generally watch the weekly heritage comic auction, and then I go over the 5 sales that were surprising to me on the high side and on the low side. But this time, there was a special sale this week for horror books. It's called their Black Cat Collection sale, and so they had around 200 or so pre-code horror books that they were selling, and I followed 40 of them. I picked out 40 that I felt were kind of like the biggest keys in there, and I picked the 5 that surprised me on the high end and 5 on the low end. So if you want to see some really cool books, some rare books, this is some incredible stuff that comes up in these auctions, and just books that you do not see come up for sale very often. So let's get started with this. All right, so for number 10, on the low side, this was a low sale. This was Blue Bolt number 115. I've actually showed this book in an unboxing before. I previously purchased a restored copy. I think it was like a CGC 2.5 or 3, something like that. I have sold it since then, but this was a 3.5 Universal, sold for just $1,560. This is a classic LB Cole cover, just an amazing skull cover, just incredible colors on this one. It's a pretty rare book too, only 58 copies on the CGC census, and I had estimated the price at $1,950. This was 20% below that estimate. Now, to give an example, a 2.0 sold just in February for $1,200. So I think for $1,560 at a 3.5, this was just a steal for whoever picked up that book. It's just a classic book, always going to be in demand, and especially when we've been seeing this ramp up in popularity for LB Cole books. So I think this person got a great deal on this book. All right, so now number 9. This was a high sale. This is another one I've talked about a couple times in the past. This book has just gone insane. I had previously hoped I could pick up a copy of this book at some point, but it's now gotten to the point where I don't know if that will ever be possible. This was Punch Comics number 12 with a CGC 2.5 that sold for $22,800. This is basically one of the pre-code horror holy grails now. This is the I would call it like the epitome of the skull covers if you're a skull cover collector. Now, it's always been pretty expensive, but just over the last year or so, it's just gone through the roof. Just absolutely crazy. Now, Punch Comics has a number of great covers in the run, a number of them that are pretty expensive, pretty valuable, but nothing comes close to this issue. I actually, in this sale, I bought a copy of issue number 15 that I thought went for a great price, so I picked that one up. So now I personally own 10, 11, 15, and 19, but I feel like issue 12 is probably always going to be a gap in any book that I've had from that run. Now, 19 is one of my personal favorites in the run. It actually had a pretty strong sale in this auction for a restored copy, so I was happy to see that. Now, there are just 32 copies of issue number 12 on the census. I had estimated the price at $20,000, so in reality, $22,800 is pretty close within that range. When throwing out estimates with books like this that don't sell very often, this was only 14% above my estimate, but I just wanted to show how expensive this book is now. I mean, it's just incredible. And even though this was a new record in grade, I can't say it was a bad buy. I mean, it was right around that range of what I would figure the book was worth, and it's just a book that seems to just keep going up and up in value. All right, now number 8. This was Crime Does Not Pay number 33 with a CGC 4.5 that sold for $2,400. This cover is just crazy. With the content that's on it, you've got multiple hanging bodies in the background. You've got the woman in the red dress who's kind of like a staple in a lot of pre-code horror books, and she's about to be killed by some crazy guy, and things just aren't looking good for her. It's not like a lot of covers where you have somebody running in to save her, it looks like on the cover. That does not appear to be the case here. There are just 43 copies on the census, a pretty rare book, at least on the census, and with how much it's worth, you would expect a lot of people would get them graded. I had estimated that this book was worth $3,500. This was 31% below my estimate. I actually bid on this one, but I stopped at $2,000, and I didn't stop because I felt like $2,400 was a bad deal. I probably would have kept bidding. It's just I bought a lot of stuff over the last week, and so I was a little tapped on my comic funds, and so I couldn't put out $2,000 on this book. So, but man, just crazy cover. Really good deal. So congratulations again to whoever picked up this book, because I think you got a steal on what is a just classic crime horror cover from the Golden Age. All right, now number 7. This is another classic cover. This is Tomb of Terror number 15 with a CGC 3.5 that sold for $6,000. This is a big high sale. This is one of the most in-demand pre-code horror covers that's out there. You've got Harvey Publications, and they just kept putting out crazier and crazier covers as it got closer and closer to when that Comics Code Authority was established. I mean, they were probably one of the main reasons that they got established, because their covers just kept getting just more and more nuts. Now, there are 113 copies of this book on the census, which is a little more than the others, but part of that is because this book just has so much value with just that. I think most people just often call it the exploding face cover. I mean, it's just such a well-known, recognized Golden Age pre-code cover. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $4,600, so this was 30% above that estimate. But again, I can't say it was a bad buy, because a 4.0 had sold for, it was like $5,600 or $5,400. So yeah, it's more than that 4.0, and the prior record was $5,000. So it set a new record. But I don't think this is a purchase that the person is going to regret. I think that this is a book that just generally has been trending up. Even though the last sale was $4,560, had dropped a little bit. This was a strong sale for the book, but not something that was really outside of where I could see it going over the next year, 2 years, that kind of thing. So I do think it was a decent purchase, especially because it's a book that you just don't see that often. A lot of people, when they have them, they keep them, and so you don't see it come up for sale all that often. And yeah, record, but still solid purchase for this book. All right, now another low sale. This is number 6. This is Lawbreakers Suspense Stories number 11. And this was a CGC 7.0 that sold for just $5,280. Now, this is one of the more disturbing pre-code horror covers that exists. Pre-code horror and / crime covers that exist. Just this creepy guy on the cover that's cut out. He's basically saying he's cut out everybody's tongues in the house so they can't scream for help. And the woman on the cover can't speak, and so she can't scream for help either. And he's holding all the tongues in his hands. This book, even if I could have bid on it, I don't think I would have, because it really grosses me out, creeps me out, and so I don't think I'd ever even really want it. But I do understand the appeal. I understand the importance within pre-code horror covers, just with how extreme this cover is. But man, it's a creepy one. And so there are 67 copies on the census. It's pretty rare. I had estimated the price of this book at $8,000, so this was 34% below that estimate. So again, this is a book that was just a steal at that price. For example, a 6.5 sold in September for $7,130. This was about $1,800 less than the 6.5 and half a grade higher. So great buy with perspective of value, but just a really disturbing cover that just, totally creeps me out. Now, on to number 5. It's a high sale. This was Fight Against Crime number 20 with a CGC 3.0 restored that sold for $5,040. Now, this is one of the most in-demand pre-code horror covers, crime covers of the Golden Age. Just a really disturbing cover with what you assume is like a mobster dumping this woman's headless body into a sewer. And now this was a restored copy, though. The restoration was a small amount of glue on the spine. There are 61 universal copies on the census, 3 restored copies. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at about $3,500, so it sold for 44% above my estimate. I don't think I can really say this was a good buy. I mean, the last 3.0 universal sold in December for $4,700, so this sold for more than that 3.0, and this one's restored. And something you need to know about Golden Age and things like glue is that they grade a little differently when you're in the Golden Age than when they grade in for like silver and bronze. And you can often see blue labels with small amount of glue on the spine, but it's only blue label if the glue isn't doing anything. And so if the glue is doing something, you get a purple label. And so in this case, that glue is likely holding the cover on. And so if you were to have that glue removed, you're going to probably have a detached cover, or at least detached maybe at one of the staples, which would likely drop the grade. And so you're going to get an even lower amount of money for that book, lower value for that book. And you have to pay to have the restoration removed and a ton of money to get that book graded, because that's going to have to go into walkthrough. And so I don't think it was a great buy. I think it was a little high. I mean, it is a rare book. You know, it's not one you're going to come across often. So if you want it, you'll pay whatever to get it. But I think this one was a little high. All right, so now for another low sale. This one was a little on the cheaper side than some of the other books. You know, a lot of these other books were multiple thousands of dollars. This was Fight Against Crime number 18 with a CGC 4.5 that sold for just $960. Now, I realize $960 is still a lot for a comic, but a lot less than what we saw with a lot of these other books that are on this list, and some that are to come. But regardless, this is a great skeleton cover. It's what you'd call a bad girl cover, because you've got the woman on the cover that's like the villain, basically, that's going to kill this cop. You have an implied hanging cover because there's the noose there. Now, it was slightly brittle pages, and that will sometimes impact prices, but often with books in this age, especially with rare books, you don't see much of an impact. I mean, I've had brittle and slightly brittle books that I've sold for records in grade, and so it's not always something that really impacts the price that much when you're talking about rare Golden Age books. Now, I had estimated the value of this book at $1,500. This was 36% below that estimate. I had bid on this one too, and I probably could have gone a bit higher, but again, it was one where I decided to stop. I just didn't really want to spend much more money this week on comics. Now, I do think the buyer got a great deal on this one. It's a pretty nice presenting cover. It's got a little chip up in the upper right corner, but in general, pretty nice 4.5 for a Golden Age book. All right, now number 3. This was one of the craziest high sales that I saw the entire sale. This is actually one that I posted on Instagram about it because it was so shocking to me when I was watching this sale. This was Weird Mysteries number 4 with a CGC 5.5 that sold for $12,000. Now, I actually also posted a homage cover to this book that I had gotten recently for a modern book, but this is a very in-demand book, but this sale was just nuts. This was a really, really high sale. It is another cover that I don't really have any desire to ever own. It just really grosses me out. There's something about that human head on the ant, the way it looks, just it's real creepy, disgusting to me. And I like the pre-code horror covers. I like a lot of them, but that one doesn't work for me. But there is a pretty rare book. There are only 48 copies on the census. There are 12 graded higher than this one, so there are plenty that are graded higher. Now, I had estimated the price at $7,000. It's an expensive book, don't get me wrong, but this was 71% above my estimate. Personally, I would not have gone that high for this book. I don't think it justifies the value right now, but prices and everything, it doesn't come up for sale all the time. It's a pretty rare book, like I said, and so it's probably a case where somebody just decided this was their chance, they're going to bid on it, and they went for it, and so set a huge new record for this book in grade. All right, now number 2. This was the most surprising low sale that I saw for the entire auction of the books that I was watching. Now, this was the steal of the night for the books I was tracking. If I had had the money available, because this is a very expensive book, I would have been bidding on this book in a heartbeat. This is one of just the most violent covers that is out there in the Golden Age. This is Crime Does Not Pay number 24 with a CGC 3.0 that sold for $6,300. Now, I'm going to say just $6,300 because that's how expensive this book is. I had estimated the price at $10,500, which was the last sale in grade from just December. This was 40% below that estimate. I mean, this person got a total steal on this book. It is one of the more in-demand books that's out there for these kind of like crime, pre-code horror kind of genre that I mixed together. And this was just an absolute steal. And the reason I talk about this one saying that it's just one of the most violent is that a lot of these covers, they have what I call implied violence. So like the one where you have the the woman who was going to hang that police officer. And so there was a noose there. The police officer was still alive. It was implied that they were going to do something. This cover has this guy putting this woman's head into the burner on a stove. I mean, it's right there on the cover. There's nothing implied about it. There's other ones where it's like they'll have like a hot poker, and it's called like the hot poker cover, and they're implying they're going to put that on the person. But in this, they're doing it. And so that's why this one is just so extreme and why it costs so much. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I see this book with Polanski on IG in like a couple weeks, because this is the type of book if you haven't checked him out before, he has some awesome pre-code horror books and some that are very expensive. So I could see him picking this one up because this was a steal for that book. All right, so now for number 1, the most surprising high sale that I saw. This was Shock Suspense Stories number 6 with a CGC 3.5 that sold for $4,320. Now, normally I don't ever say something was a bad purchase because I don't want to try to like make someone feel bad about buying a book or something, but I think there are also cases where you can learn something from some purchases, because this was not a good purchase. Now, this is a very popular pre-code horror book, probably the most popular from this run from Shock Suspense Stories, but it's a book that sells pretty often. There are 253 copies on the census, so quite a few for the golden age. So there's really no need to overpay like this. And so, for example, with the price that this book was paid for, you could have gotten almost a 7.5 on eBay right now. So this is an example of knowing what you're paying versus what else is available out there. It's one thing if you're buying a rare book like that Weird Mysteries number 4 that just you may never really see come up for sale, and so you take your chance and buy it. But this is a book that is on, there were 4 copies on eBay when this one sold, including a 3.0 for like $18.50. And that one actually sold almost immediately after this, because the person did what I was almost thinking of doing. I went on eBay and looked right away because I knew there were ones out there that were way cheaper. And so I thought about buying it. I decided not to, but someone clearly did buy it right after that sale. I think there was maybe a little too much excitement in the auction. You've got to know what else is out there, what other options you have to pick up that book. And since this one really isn't a super rare book, it does sell all the time. I think this was not a good purchase. And I think if the person tries to sell this book, they're going to have a hard time getting their money back for quite a few years. All right, so those were the top 10 surprising pre-code horror sales that I saw this week in the special Heritage Horror Auction. Hope you enjoyed this video. Saw some books that maybe you have never seen before, because there are some rare, expensive books that were in this auction. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.